A millionaire witnesses his maid being shamed on a $5 blind date, and her life transforms. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The cheap diner smelled faintly of old coffee and reheated fries, the kind of place that tried to pass off dim lighting as ambiance. At a two-person booth near the window, Lena sat stiffly, hands folded on her lap, her worn wallet tucked beneath her leg like she was guarding a secret. She had spent the entire week convincing herself she deserved one small chance at happiness, one blind date, one evening where she would not be the maid. And she truly believed she had prepared well enough, until her date arrived. The man across from her, Bryce, wore too much cologne, and a smirk that stayed on even when he was not talking. He tapped the plastic menu with impatience. "So, Lena, what do you do again? You mumbled something earlier." She swallowed. "I work as a housemaid." The word dropped between them like a stone into water. His eyebrows lifted. The smirk widened. "A maid? Wow. And you agreed to a blind date with only... what? $5? His voice rose loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Lena's cheeks burned as he leaned back dramatically, laughing under his breath. "Come on, you cannot even afford a real meal. Why did you even show up?" Lena tried to steady her breathing, trying not to cry. She wanted to explain that the $5 was not for dinner, that it was her emergency money, that she had spent the last of her cash on bus fare just to get here. But the words stayed trapped in her throat. At the far end of the diner, someone shifted in their seat. Ethan Hale, clean-cut in a charcoal suit, the only man in the entire place whose presence felt sharply out of place, rested his forearms on the table. He had come to this run-down diner for a quiet moment alone before a late meeting, but instead, he found himself unable to look away from the scene unfolding across the room. He knew Lena, knew her quiet footsteps in the halls of his estate, knew the way she always lowered her gaze when speaking to him, as if she believed she was not allowed to take up space. And now, seeing her here, shoulders shaking slightly as she stared at her lap, something inside him tightened. Bryce laughed again. "Honestly, I have never seen anything this pathetic. Who shows up to a date broke?" Lena's fingernails dug into her palms. Ethan's jaw clenched. He stood without thinking, his chair scraping lightly against the floor. His shadow stretched across the diner as he took one step, then another, the weight of his footsteps echoing like a quiet storm preparing to break. He did not raise his voice. He did not cause a scene. He simply walked toward her, eyes steady, expression unreadable, yet filled with a fierce protectiveness Lena had never seen directed at her before. And before she even realized he was there, Ethan Hale was standing beside her table. "Lena," he said softly, "you should not have to sit through this." She looked up in shock at her billionaire employer, just as the whole diner fell silent. Ethan's voice cut through the diner's hum like a clean blade. Lena froze, her eyes wide, unsure if she was imagining him. Bryce looked up with a confused scowl, clearly irritated that someone dared interrupt his performance. "Who are you?" Bryce demanded. Ethan did not look at him. His focus was entirely on Lena, his tone steady but gentle. "Lena, you do not have to stay here." Her lips parted, trembling. "Mr. Hale, I did not know you were... You did nothing wrong," Ethan said softly. His calmness only made Bryce louder. "Hold on. You know this guy? What is he? Your boss or something?" Ethan finally shifted his gaze. The look he gave Bryce was cold enough to freeze the air between them. "I am her employer," he said, "and you will lower your voice." Bryce scoffed. "Employer? A maid and her boss on the same night? Weird coincidence. Look, man, your girl showed up here broke. It is embarrassing. I was doing her a favor." Lena's entire body tensed, as if she wanted to disappear into the cracked vinyl seat. Ethan noticed. His jaw tightened. "Stand up, Lena," he said quietly. She hesitated, torn between humiliation and disbelief, but Ethan extended a hand, not to touch her, but as a silent escort away from pain. She stood. Ethan reached into his jacket, took out his card, and placed it neatly on the table. His voice remained low, but every word carried weight. Her meal is covered, and next time you decide to make someone feel small for sport, do not. Bryce rolled his eyes. Whatever, man. She is just a maid. You rich types love pretending you care. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Lena flinched, as if she had been slapped. Ethan's expression darkened, but he did not raise his voice. She is a human being, he said, and that is something you clearly forgot how to be. Without waiting for a response, he guided Lena toward the exit. She followed a few steps behind him, her heartbeat loud in her ears, the smell of coffee and fried food fading as they stepped into the cool evening air. Outside, the parking lot lights cast long shadows across the cracked pavement. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not want you to see that. I did not want anyone to see that." Ethan turned toward her. His voice softened. "Lena, none of what happened inside was your fault." Tears gathered in her eyes. He was right about the money. I only had $5. I should not have come to that date at all. "You had hope," Ethan said. "There is nothing wrong with that." A long silence stretched between them. Lena looked down at her worn shoes, feeling smaller than ever. "Why were you there?" she asked quietly. Ethan breathed out, his tone honest. "I needed a moment away from the office. That diner was close. I did not expect to find you there." She nodded, still overwhelmed. Ethan stepped aside, giving her space. "Let me drive you home." She blinked. "I do not want to trouble you." "It is no trouble," he said. "Not tonight." Lena hesitated, then slowly nodded. As they walked toward his car, Lena glanced back at the diner's glowing windows. Somewhere inside, Bryce was probably laughing again. But for the first time all night, she felt the humiliation loosen its grip on her chest. Ethan opened the passenger door gently, waiting as she settled into the seat. As he walked around to the driver's side, one thought echoed in Lena's mind. No one had ever stood up for her like that before. The car ride was quiet at first. The steady hum of the engine filled the space between them, soft and strangely comforting. Streetlights washed over Lena's face in warm, fleeting bands of gold and shadow. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, still embarrassed, still unsure of how she was supposed to behave around her employer outside of work. Ethan glanced at her briefly. She looked exhausted, and not just from tonight. He had seen that same tired look on her face many mornings at the estate. He just had never asked why. "You are safe now," he said gently. She nodded, but her voice trembled when she answered. "I know. Thank you for stepping in. You did not deserve what he said to you." Lena swallowed hard. "People say things like that all the time. They assume I am less because of what I do." Ethan shook his head. "There is nothing less about you." The words hung in the air between them, warm and unexpected. Lena felt her throat tighten. No one in her life had ever spoken to her with that kind of sincerity. He continued driving until the car turned into a quiet street, lined with aging apartment buildings. The lights were dim. Some windows were boarded up. The wind carried the faint smell of damp concrete. Lena stiffened. She hated the idea of him seeing where she lived. "You can drop me off right here," she said quietly. "I can walk the rest of the way." "Lena," he responded, "I am not letting you walk alone at this hour." She knew arguing would be pointless. Ethan Hale was not a man easily dissuaded, so she guided him toward the worn-down building at the end of the street. The parking lot was poorly lit, with cracks running like veins through the asphalt. When he parked and stepped out to walk her to the entrance, she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You really do not have to walk with me. I want to make sure you get inside safely," Ethan replied. They reached the stairwell door. Lena hesitated before speaking. "This is where I am for now. It is not much." Ethan studied the dark hallway behind her, the peeling paint, the flickering light overhead. Something in his chest tightened. "You should not have to live like this." She shook her head. "This is reality for me, Mr. Hale. Rent is cheap. It is all I can afford." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He did not want to sound like he was pitying her. He respected her too much for that. "Lena," he finally said, "if you ever feel unsafe here, or if you ever need help, you can tell me." His tone was firm, not commanding, but deeply sincere. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shining faintly in the dim hallway light. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "I am just your maid." He shook his head slowly. "You were not just anything." Her breath caught. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air vibrated with something unspoken, fragile and new. Lena pulled herself back to reality. "I should go inside. It is late." Ethan nodded. "Good night, Lena." "Good night, Mr. Hale." She slipped inside the building. Ethan waited until he heard her door lock before he turned back toward the parking lot. A cold wind swept through the street, but Ethan hardly noticed. He stood beside his car, staring at the cracked pavement beneath his feet, replaying the moment she asked him why he cared. He knew why. Somewhere along the way, without realizing it, he had begun to see Lena not as a member of his staff, but as someone who carried quiet strength in a world that constantly tried to diminish her. He exhaled slowly, climbed into his car, and drove into the night with a single thought echoing through him. Tonight was only the beginning. Morning light slipped through the blinds of Lena's small apartment, casting pale stripes across her worn carpet. She barely slept. The humiliation from last night clung to her like a shadow, but so did the memory of Ethan's voice, calm and steady, shielding her when she felt most exposed. She replayed every moment in her mind, almost disbelieving that someone like him would defend her. By the time she arrived at the Hale estate for her shift, her chest tightened with anxiety. The mansion stood silent and grand, so different from the cramped hallway she had walked through only hours earlier. She stepped inside, smoothing the front of her uniform as she tried to steady her breath. In the foyer, Ethan's assistant, Grace, greeted her with a polite nod. "Morning, Lena. Mr. Hale asked to see you in the garden room when you arrive." Lena froze. "Me?" "Yes. He said it is important." Her heart quickened. She forced a small smile, thanked Grace, and walked down the long hallway lined with polished floors and framed art. Each step echoed louder than the last. She felt out of place, suddenly too aware of every flaw in her uniform and every insecurity she carried. The garden room was filled with soft light and the faint scent of eucalyptus. Ethan stood near the tall windows, reviewing documents on a glass table. He looked up the moment she entered. "Good morning, Lena." "Good morning, Mr. Hale." Her voice was small but steady. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes, come in." She stepped forward, clasping her hands behind her back. Ethan studied her carefully, but not in a way that made her shrink. Instead, his expression held a gentleness that unsettled her more than anger ever could. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. Lena looked down. "I am fine. I am ready to work." "That is not what I asked." Her breath hitched. I am all right." Ethan set the documents aside. "What happened last night should never have happened to you." Lena shook her head. "It was just a date gone wrong. He does not matter." "But something he said mattered," Ethan replied. "He wanted you to believe that your worth is measured by money. That is not true." Lena did not know how to answer. She stared at the floor, fighting the emotion rising in her throat. Ethan softened his tone. "Lena, I did not step in out of obligation. I stepped in because I could not watch someone treat you that way." She blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. "I appreciate what you did, truly. But I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," he said firmly. "Not to me." A quiet beat passed. Ethan gestured toward a chair. "Sit with me for a moment." She hesitated, then sat across from him. Sunlight warmed her shoulders as she folded her hands neatly on her lap. "Lena," Ethan said gently, "I want to ask you something. Not as your employer, but as someone who cares about your well-being." Her heart thudded. "What is it? Is everything all right at home?" She stiffened. "I'm managing. Managing is not the same as being all right." Lena swallowed hard. "My mother's health is declining. The treatment costs more than what I can earn. I did not want to bring personal problems into work." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You should never feel alone in something like that." Her eyes glistened, but she did not let the tears fall. "I do not know what else I can do. I'm trying my best." He held her gaze. "Your best is remarkable." Those 4 words struck her harder than anything Bryce had said the night before. Lena had grown used to surviving in silence. Praise was foreign. Kindness was rare. Ethan stood and walked to the window, his voice calm but charged with something unspoken. "You deserve better than what life has handed you, Lena. And whether you believe it or not, I want to help." She looked up, startled. "Why?" You barely know me." He turned back to her, his expression soft but unwavering. Sometimes it does not take long to recognize someone worth caring about. Lena's breath faltered, and for a moment the room felt too still, too warm, too filled with something she was afraid to name. Before she could respond, Grace knocked gently on the door. "Mr. Hale, your meeting is in 10 minutes. Ethan nodded. "Thank you. I will be right there." Grace left. Ethan looked back at Lena. "We will continue this conversation later," he said quietly. "For now, just take care of yourself." Lena nodded, though her heart was unsteady. As Ethan walked out of the room, she realized something had shifted between them, something subtle but impossible to ignore, and for the first time, she wondered what it might mean for both of their lives. For the rest of the day, Lena moved through her tasks with unusual silence, polishing the oak banisters, arranging fresh flowers in the hallway vases, folding linens in the laundry room. Everything felt heavier, as if each motion carried the weight of last night and the unexpected warmth of the morning conversation. But what lingered most was Ethan's voice. Sometimes it does not take long to recognize someone worth caring about. No one had ever said something like that to her, especially not someone who lived in a world so far above her own. By late afternoon, the estate grew quieter. Many of the daytime staff had clocked out, and a soft golden light washed through the tall windows as the sun began to lower behind the hills. Lena was wiping down the marble counters in the kitchen when she heard footsteps. She turned and saw Ethan standing in the doorway, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tie loosened as if he had come straight from a long meeting. "I hope I am not interrupting," he said. "You are not, Mr. Hale. I was just finishing up." He stepped farther inside. "I noticed you did not take your break today." "I did not feel hungry," she admitted quietly. Ethan studied her for a moment, then walked to the refrigerator and pulled out a container. "The chef left extra soup. You should eat something." She blinked. "You do not have to." He slid the container toward her on the counter. "Please, it is not a request as your employer. Consider it a concern from someone who does not want to see you faint from exhaustion." His tone was firm but warm, and despite herself, Lena felt her lips curve into a small, grateful smile. "Thank you." As she warmed the soup on the stove, Ethan leaned against the counter across from her, arms crossed loosely. The silence between them was not tense this time. It was calm, familiar, almost comfortable. When she sat down to eat, he remained nearby, watching her with a quiet focus that made her chest tighten. After a few minutes, he asked softly, "How long has your mother been ill?" Lena hesitated. "A while. It got worse this year. And you are handling everything alone?" She nodded. "There is no one else." Ethan looked down, as if absorbing the weight of her words. "That must be incredibly hard." "It is," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I do not have a choice." "You do," he replied gently. "You just never had help before." Lena paused, spoon hovering halfway to her lips. "Why does it feel like you want to help now?" Ethan met her gaze directly. "Because I do." The honesty in his eyes startled her. It was not pity. It was something deeper, steadier, something she had not felt from anyone in years. She lowered her spoon. "I do not want to take advantage of your kindness." "You are not," he said firmly. "Kindness is a choice. I am choosing it." Her throat tightened. She looked away, afraid he might see the tears gathering there. Ethan walked toward the sink, giving her a moment of privacy, but his voice remained soft, carrying across the room. "Lena, what happened last night made one thing very clear to me," he said. "You have been fighting the world alone for too long." She exhaled shakily, the truth of those words settling deep inside her. "And I realized something else," he continued. "You do not let people help you easily." She looked up. "I do not want to burden anyone." "You will never be a burden to me," Ethan said. The room fell still. The steady ticking of the wall clock echoed in the quiet kitchen. Lena whispered, "I do not understand why someone like you would say that." Ethan took a step closer. "Because someone like you deserves to hear it." The truth in his tone wrapped around her like a warm blanket, both soothing and frightening. She did not know how to accept it. She did not know if she was allowed to. Before she could speak, Grace's voice floated from the hallway. "Mr. Hale, your 6 o'clock call is ready." Ethan straightened slightly, but his eyes stayed on Lena. I will be right there. He gave her a final, gentle glance before leaving the kitchen. And as Lena sat alone with the half-finished soup, her heart finally admitted something her mind had been too afraid to say. She trusted him. More than she had trusted anyone in a very long time. The next morning, Lena arrived early at the estate, hoping the quiet hours before sunrise would settle her thoughts. She needed the stillness. Last night, Ethan's words had followed her home like a soft echo she could not silence. You will never be a burden to me. She replayed it again and again, unsure whether those words were meant just for comfort or something more she was too afraid to name. Inside the estate, the halls were dim and hushed. Lena carried a basket of fresh linens toward the guest wing, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpets. As she rounded a corner, she nearly collided with Ethan's housekeeper, Maria, who looked more flustered than usual. "Oh, Lena, there you are," Maria said breathlessly. "Mr. Hale asked for you. He is in his study." Lena blinked. "Right now?" "Yes, right now." Maria lowered her voice. He sounded urgent. Lena felt her stomach tighten. She set the basket aside and made her way toward the study, her pulse growing heavier with each step. She knocked softly. "Come in," Ethan called from inside. She entered. Ethan stood near his desk, phone in hand, brows drawn together in a way Lena had rarely seen. Papers were spread across the desk, medical charts among them. He looked up at her, and the tension in his expression shifted into concern. "Lena, I received a call this morning," he said quietly. Her breath caught. "Is something wrong?" "It is about your mother." Lena's hands trembled as she placed them against the back of a chair for support. "What happened?" Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The clinic said her condition worsened overnight. They recommended a higher-level procedure that they cannot perform there." Lena's heart dropped. "But I cannot afford." "You will not handle it alone," Ethan interrupted gently. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by fear and helplessness. "Mr. Hale, I do not know what to do. The treatments are more expensive than anything I could ever pay. I already owe." Ethan shook his head. "Debt is not your concern today. Your mother is." Lena's eyes lifted slowly, meeting his. She wanted to argue. She wanted to say it was too much, that he was already doing far more than any employer would. But the words refused to come. Fear had taken their place. He took a small step closer. "Lena, listen to me. Your mother is not running out of time. She is just out of resources. That is something I can help with." She swallowed hard. "Why would you do that?" The question seemed to linger in the space between them, heavy with meaning neither of them had dared explore fully. Ethan exhaled, letting the truth sit openly in his expression. "Because I care about you, and because no one should have to watch a parent suffer when there is something that can be done." Lena's breath trembled. Tears welled, but she blinked them back, refusing to break. "I do not want you to feel obligated," she whispered. "I do not," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I am choosing this." Her knees weakened. She sank into the nearest chair, covering her mouth as emotion pressed against her chest. Ethan lowered himself slightly so he was level with her. "I already called a specialist downtown. They can take her today. I will drive you there myself." Lena's heart thudded, every beat filled with gratitude and disbelief. I do not know how to thank you." "You do not owe me anything," he said softly. "Just let me help." For a moment she could only stare at him. The powerful man she always saw behind a polished desk had vanished. In his place was someone human, someone warm, someone who cared enough to move mountains for her, without expecting a single thing in return. A faint knock sounded at the door. Grace's voice followed. "Mr. Hale, your car is ready." Ethan nodded but did not look away from Lena. "Come with me. Your mother needs you." She rose slowly, her hands trembling, but her steps steady. As they walked out of the study together, Lena realized something undeniable. Ethan Hale was no longer just her employer. He was becoming the one person she trusted when everything else was falling apart. The drive to the medical center felt longer than it truly was. Lena sat in the passenger seat, fingers twisted tightly in her lap, staring out the window as the city blurred past. Ethan kept his attention on the road, but his glances toward her carried the same steady reassurance he had shown since morning. When they arrived, a team of nurses escorted Lena to her mother's room, while Ethan handled the paperwork. Lena's mother lay weak beneath crisp white sheets, her breathing shallow, her skin pale. Lena's heart clenched. She pulled a chair close and gently took her mother's hand. "I am here, Mama," she whispered. "You are going to be all right." Her mother's eyelids fluttered open slightly. "Lena, you should not have taken time off work." "I do not care about work right now," Lena said softly. "I care about you." A faint smile tugged at her mother's lips, but exhaustion overtook her quickly. As the monitors beeped steadily, Lena blinked back tears. A moment later, Ethan stepped inside the room, speaking quietly so he would not startle her. "The specialist is preparing everything. They believe she has a strong chance with the right procedure." Lena stood, wiping her eyes. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," Ethan replied gently. The doctor entered then, explaining the procedure and the urgency. Lena listened intently, absorbing every detail. The words critical window, rapid intervention, and significant improvement potential circled through her mind like waves crashing against rocks. She nodded, even when her throat tightened painfully. When the doctor left, Lena felt herself sway. Ethan reached out instinctively, steadying her with his hand on her arm. "You are doing everything you can. Stay with that." She nodded slowly. I hate feeling helpless." "You are not helpless," Ethan said. "You got her here. You made the right call." She let out a shaky breath. "I would have lost her if you did not step in." Ethan did not answer immediately. He simply looked at her with quiet resolve, his eyes saying what his voice did not. They waited together in the family lounge while the medical team prepared her mother. The room was filled with dim lighting, muted colors, and the soft hum of vending machines down the hall. Lena sat forward on a small couch, elbows on her knees, hands clasped. Ethan sat beside her, close but not imposing. "If you need to cry, it is all right," he said softly. "I cannot," she whispered. "If I start, I might not stop." He hesitated only a second before saying, "You do not have to be strong every moment." Lena let out a fragile breath. "I have been strong for so long that I forgot how to fall apart." Ethan's voice lowered. "Then lean for a moment. I am here." Her chest tightened, but instead of pulling away, she let the words settle into her bones. A few minutes passed before she looked at him, really looked at him, the man who ran empires, who held power most people could not imagine, who sat beside her now with the patience and stillness of someone who cared deeply. "Why are you doing all of this?" she murmured. This time, Ethan did not avoid the truth. "Because your pain matters to me." The words stole her breath, her eyes glistened, and she fought the urge to look away. Before either of them could say more, the doctor returned. "We are ready for her," he said. Lena stood quickly, nerves tightening like a knot. She followed alongside the bed as her mother was wheeled toward the operating room, whispering encouragements she hoped her mother could still hear. When the doors closed, Lena remained standing there, staring at the small window, her hands trembling. Ethan stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence steadying her. "She is in good hands," he said. Lena let out a shaky breath. "I am scared." "I know," Ethan said, "but you are not going through this alone." For the first time in a long time, Lena believed it, and as the red "procedure in progress" light blinked to life above the door, Ethan Hale made a silent promise to himself. He would not leave her side. Not today, not while her world hung in the balance. The hours dragged on with a slow heaviness that tightened around Lena's chest. The red light above the operating room door blinked rhythmically, each pulse reminding her that her mother's life was suspended between two possible futures. She stood rigid, arms wrapped tightly around herself, unable to sit. Ethan stayed beside her the entire time. He did not check his phone, he did not step away for calls, and he did not allow the world outside that hallway to pull him back into it. Instead, he remained present, grounded, and quietly attentive to every tremor in Lena's breathing. At one point, her knees felt weak, and he pulled a chair closer. "Sit for a moment," he said softly. "I cannot," she whispered. "What if something happens while I am not looking?" He lowered his voice. "Something happening is not dependent on where you stand, but you will need strength when she wakes up." She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair. Ethan sat in the one beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Minutes passed, then an hour. and another. At last the red light dimmed. Lena gasped and stood instantly, heart hammering. Ethan rose with her as the doors opened and the surgeon stepped into the hallway, pulling down his mask. "Lena?" he asked gently. "Yes," she breathed, barely able to speak. "The procedure went well," he said. "Your mother responded better than expected. She is stable. She will need time to recover, but the worst is behind her." Lena's body collapsed into relief so intense that her legs almost gave out. She pressed her hand over her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Tears she had fought for hours, for days, maybe even for years. Ethan caught her before she fell, his arm sliding around her back, holding her steady as emotion overtook her. "She is safe?" Lena whispered. "She is safe," the doctor confirmed with a reassuring nod. "You can see her in a few minutes." When the doctor walked away, Lena remained in Ethan's arms for a long moment, overwhelmed and trembling. She finally pulled back, wiping her cheeks with shaking fingers. "I am sorry," she said breathlessly. "I did not mean to—" "You do not have to apologize for feeling relief," Ethan said. "You have carried this fear alone for a long time." Lena shook her head. "Not alone, not today. You stayed with me the entire time." "I told you I would," Ethan replied. The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the heated hallway ever could. They walked toward the recovery room, and when Lena stepped inside, her breath caught again. Her mother lay resting peacefully, color returning to her cheeks. The rise and fall of her chest was slow but steady, beautiful in its simplicity. Lena moved to her bedside, taking her mother's hand gently. "Mama," she whispered, "you made it." Her mother did not wake, but her fingers twitched faintly, responding to the sound of her daughter's voice. Lena exhaled a long, trembling breath. Ethan stood quietly at the doorway, watching the scene with softened eyes. He did not interrupt, did not move closer. He simply let Lena have this moment. After a few minutes, she turned toward him. "She is going to be all right," Lena said, her voice thick with gratitude. "She is," Ethan said, "and so are you." Lena looked at him for a long moment, the weight of everything he had done pressing into her heart. "Ethan, you changed everything for me today." His expression softened in a way she had never witnessed before. "No, Lena. I did what anyone should do when they care about someone." Her breath stalled at the quiet confession. She could feel the world shift around them, drawing them into a new closeness that felt both undeniable and terrifying. Before she could respond, the nurse stepped inside to check on her mother, breaking the tension. But the truth lingered in the air, unmistakable. Ethan's feelings were no longer something he could hide, and Lena could no longer pretend she did not feel them too. The following week unfolded slowly, like the gentle easing of a storm that had hovered too long overhead. Lena visited her mother every morning before work, watching as her strength began to return piece by piece. Color returned to her mother's face, and her voice grew a little stronger each day. During every visit, Ethan was there. Sometimes he waited outside the room, giving Lena space. Other times he stepped inside quietly, offering small comforts. A cup of warm tea, a gentle question, a steady presence that grounded her in ways she could not explain. Lena noticed it more and more. The way the nurses softened when Ethan spoke, the way he handled every detail without hesitation, and the way his eyes always found hers first, even in a crowded hallway. One afternoon, after the doctor announced that her mother would be discharged soon, Lena walked out of the room with a weight lifted from her shoulders, a weight she had carried for far too long. Ethan stood waiting by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the sunlight stretch across the hospital floor. When he turned toward her, the warmth in his eyes made her pulse quicken. "She is doing better," he said. "She really is." Lena exhaled deeply. "And it is because of you." He shook his head slowly. "It is because she is strong, and because you never gave up on her." Lena stepped closer. "Ethan, I would not have been able to save her without your help. I need you to understand that." He held her gaze, his expression softening. "I did not help you expecting anything in return." "I know," she said quietly. "That is what scares me. You care so much, and I do not know how to handle it." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then spoke with a sincerity that resonated through the quiet hallway. "Lena, I care about you because you are worth caring about, not because of your job, not because of what you can give me, because of who you are." Her breath caught. She felt the words settle somewhere deep inside her, warm and terrifying. "I never thought someone like you would look at someone like me this way," she whispered. "I am a maid. I grew up with nothing, and you live in a world I do not understand." Ethan took another step toward her, closing the space between them. "Lena, wealth does not define a person. Character does, and your character is extraordinary." She blinked rapidly as tears filled her eyes. "You make me feel seen." "That is because I see you," he said. "All of you." A soft silence fell, filled with unspoken truths. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and held out something small. A delicate silver chain glinted in his hand, the same necklace Lena had dropped days earlier during her rushed morning routine. "I believe this belongs to you," he said. Her lips parted. She had not even realized she lost it. "It is my mother's," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said gently. "I found it in the hallway and kept it safe. I thought this should come back to you now, when things are finally healing." Lena's tears spilled freely as she took the necklace. It was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of her past, a piece of everything she fought for. "Ethan," she whispered, "I do not know how to thank you for everything." He smiled softly. "You do not have to thank me. Just let me stay in your life." The words settled between them like a promise. Lena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Ethan's breath caught in quiet surprise, before he gently returned the embrace, holding her with a tenderness that steadied her trembling shoulders. For a moment, the world outside the hospital hallway disappeared. There was only the steady warmth of his arms and the quiet certainty blooming between them. When she finally pulled back, Ethan brushed a tear from her cheek with the side of his thumb. "Let us take this one step at a time," he said. Lena nodded. "I want that." As they walked out of the hospital together, sunlight spilled across the pavement, bright and warm after a long week of shadows. Her mother would recover. Her future no longer felt impossible. And Ethan Hale, the man who had stepped into her life when she needed help the most, was now walking beside her, not as her employer, but as someone who chose her. And for the first time in a very long time, Lena believed she was allowed to hope again.